Well, when you go to Adam Creighton, you get a young man with a refreshing perspective. Writing today, he correctly talks about Joe Biden on holidays, do you mind, at Camp David. Adam writes, quote, "No words could sugarcoat the extraordinary humiliation for the US in general and Joe Biden and his intelligence agencies in particular, the best funded and most experienced in the world." Adam joins me from Washington. Adam, thank you always for your time. I mean, did Biden not know, or could he not digest intelligence reports, but the emphatic denial that the Taliban would overrun Afghanistan surely legitimises the Trump call for his resignation.
Yes, good evening, Alan. Look, certainly it is an extraordinary intelligence failure, and it's hard to know whether it was President Biden who was overruling the generals and the intelligence reports, or the intelligence reports themselves. But certainly just a few days before the fall of Kabul, senior officials were briefing out to the media that it was possible, just possible, mind you, that Kabul could be encircled within 30 days and taken over within 90 days. And of course, just a couple of days later, it completely fell to the Taliban. So, so there is an extraordinary failing, and a disconnect between Washington D.C. and what's happening on the ground.
Not possible to believe. It's 9/11 all over. Now, many Trump critics would say that Trump also wanted the troops out by May, but he had established very firm rules of disengagement with the Taliban, and I can't imagine him allowing the Taliban the scorched earth policy that they've now implemented. But leading experts on Afghanistan, writing frequently from Kabul, Adam, have argued that the takeover of some of these cities was being planned for months, if not years. And we're meant to believe that America didn't know, Adam.
Well, apparently not. Look, I mean, it is extremely embarrassing. And I mean, as for Trump's withdrawal, we'll never know exactly how that would have gone. I mean, certainly Trump's a more unpredictable figure, and so perhaps that may have changed the way the Taliban responded. But just slightly in Biden's defence here, and the bigger issue here, I think, is really whether the US, could stay in Afghanistan. I think pretty clearly they could not. I mean, the American people were not behind it, and they'd been there 20 years. But the withdrawal was certainly bungled. There is no question there. But one thing President Biden did say yesterday, which I thought was very interesting, and to the extent it's true, is that the US wanted to basically evacuate more people earlier, but the Afghan government did not want that to happen, because they told the US, if you start to do that, then that's going to trigger a crisis of confidence in our government. And so it's a difficult question. Should the US have ignored the Afghan government?
Look, I just want to come back to this intelligence thing, because the argument today is they're saying, oh, the Afghan caved in, they didn't fight. Now, I read today the military of 300,000 didn't put up a fight, but my understanding is many of them hadn't been paid for months. There was no central coordination, no backup. They were too demoralised to fight. Didn't America know any of this?
Well, look, certainly that is the biggest story here. You're quite right. I mean, this is an army of 300,000 people. I mean, that's a much larger army than France or Spain or Britain probably put together. And yet it didn't even fire a shot. And that's very odd. I mean, you have to ask, frankly, you probably got to ask the sympathies of some of the soldiers themselves, whether they were that upset about a Taliban takeover. I mean, you think some of them would have fought if they were really upset about it, and their faith in their own government. They obviously disobeyed orders to fight from the former regime. President Biden said yesterday in his speech that the US was paying their salaries and providing them all the munitions. So I suppose we have to take that at face value, but it is just an extraordinary shock that they failed so comprehensively.
And of course, then if you find America abandoning a so-called ally, what is the world to make of America's status in the past? Just before you go, it is a humiliating defeat for the West. What does it mean for the West vis-a-vis Russia and China?
Well, look, this is the most important question, certainly for Australia, I think. Look, talking to former senior officials yesterday, they tended to play down the geopolitical significance of the withdrawal, saying the US was still overwhelmingly the most powerful country in the world, and that Taiwan should not be worried that the US is any less likely to defend it. Indeed, you could make an argument that maybe it's more likely, but the problem is terrorism now. The US no longer has eyes and ears in the Middle East in that area, and so it doesn't know what's fermenting.
And they're not going to say the opposite, because that would be to concede significantly. Good to talk to you, my friend. We'll keep in touch.
Indeed.
Thank you for the wonderful work you do. He writes brilliantly in the Australian newspaper. Adam Creighton.